So that was in Kansas where I had there was a tornado that ended up touching down in the town behind me. I heard the tornado sirens going and I thought, oh man, I gotta go. But there was this sense of huge adrenaline rush. And honestly, I loved it. When there's big storms coming during bike touring, I love that because you just feel that adrenaline going and you feel that mercy of nature and you really feel the power of nature, which I love.
Welcome to the Seek Travel Ride podcast, where we share the stories and experiences of people who have undertaken amazing adventures by bike. Whether it's crossing state borders, mountain ranges, countries or continents, we want to share that spirit of adventuring on two wheels with our listeners. Hello, I'm your host Bella Malloy, and I'm excited to introduce my guest for today's episode of Seek Travel Ride, Daniel Troia. Daniel certainly isn't the first person to complete a crossing of the US from east to west and back again. His journey would take him 7 months, 19 states all up, through many weather extremes as well. He'd ride through national parks, deserts in the searing heat, and cross mountain passes blanketed in deep snow. But this trip of his was certainly unique, as Daniel took the decision to embark on this journey without any money or food. Instead, he would see how far the kindness of strangers would take him. He also filmed his entire experience, including the interactions with those he met on the road. His film's called We Are All in This Together, and it is a truly captivating experience. The revelations from Daniel's trip are numerous and many, and it certainly opened up my eyes to something which, to be honest, has been a constant theme on this very podcast. Just how the generosity of strangers we meet on the road can often leave us lost for words. What was different here, though, was that it felt like the people who were the most generous to Daniel were those who didn't have much themselves. And this would happen to him over and over again. I'm really looking forward to exploring this further with Daniel today, as I talk through the experiences of not just this trip, but how taking that journey has transformed and shaped him into the person he is today. Daniel, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much and super stoked to be here.
Oh, I'm really excited for this one, Daniel. I watched your film just a week or so ago now, and this podcast has given me an opportunity to get these insights with each of my guest stories, but just watching that film from start to finish, it was really emotional and overwhelming for me at times as well. But Daniel, a question which I start my show with, and I ask this of all my guests is, do you remember the very first bike you ever rode?
I remember what it looked like, yeah. Yeah, bright green little bike, yeah, for sure.
Oh, and were you a natural on it? Did you learn straight away?
No, I crashed a couple times for sure. I crashed. You know what's really crazy though? So this was 1990. I was 5 years old, and I actually have footage of that, the very first time I rode my bike, which back then it wasn't as common to have that moment captured. Really special.
So hang on, is there any footage that focuses in on your face? I'd love to capture that moment of what it's like when you first start. Are you white knuckle fear on the handlebars, or are you like, let me at it, I want to go? Or
You know, it's so funny you say that because I am currently putting together a new film. Yeah, that's a crucial part of my new film, is showing that moment where I took my first bike ride. And you definitely see this crazy amount of joy in my face. And so it's so funny you say that because I'm literally yes, I have that moment captured. It's amazing.
Brilliant. And I will say, I think part of the reason I asked that, Daniel, is through the benefit of asking that same question to all my guests as the first one. It gives me an insight into how bikes may have been something for them that they either kept their whole life or re-picked up as an adult. There's always common themes there as well. The word freedom gets used quite a lot when people first learn how to ride a bike. It gave them freedom, this ability to explore further and stuff like that. How cool is it as a filmmaker, you get to look back at that raw, footage. You get to see that moment take place, because when I look, Daniel, at what you've done, bike travel features here. You are a bit of an adventurous spirit, aren't you?
Yeah, definitely. And just taking a step back again, you use the word freedom. That's, of course, that's what you experience when you're on a bike, for sure. Yeah, the adventure spirit, yeah, it's there, definitely. But also with bike touring, I mean, shoot, man, it's just you have this really special opportunity to connect with people in a way that you don't get to connect with if you're driving a car. Being on a bike with all your bags, etc., like you attract attention from people, and there's just curiosity. People are like, who is this person with all these bags, a sleeping bag? Maybe they're looking kind of like dirty and just like tired, and like, where are they coming from? What's their story?
Yeah, definitely. It's almost like what's the number one question that you get asked by a stranger? Is it, where did you come from? Where are you going? How far do you ride each day?
There it is. And maybe where do you go to the bathroom? That's another one I get sometimes. Yeah.
I haven't had that one yet myself. Oh. Maybe I need to look dirtier. I don't know.
That's what it is. Yeah. I'll tell you a real quick story. So I was in Utah, and I was riding through like sandstone canyons and stuff, right? And then I crossed into Colorado, and I've been in Colorado for like a couple of days, and then I finally took a shower. All this red powder came off of me, and I was like, that was from like the last state I was in. That's how dirty I was. It was like, yeah, that wasn't from today. That was 5 days ago.
Every single bicycle traveler that wild camps can relate to this.
Yeah, that's why I'm always on the lookout for a river, though. I love jumping in rivers when I'm on a bike tour.
Speaking of bike tours, Daniel, we're obviously going to go deep into the details of the one that's the highlight of your film here. It's not the only bike tour you've ever done. You enjoy traveling by bicycle quite a lot. You've definitely done some previous trips, haven't you?
Yeah. When I was 28, I did my first bike tour. It's kind of a funny story. Up until 28, I had never even camped ever in my whole life. I'd never slept in a tent. Crazy, right? And I remember having this goal of riding across the country with a buddy. And I remember leaving Portland, Oregon, heading towards New York City. And I remember leaving and thinking, like, I have absolutely no idea what I'm doing at all right now. And it was like this wonderful feeling of just like, who knows, like, what's going to happen. Yeah, and and since then, like, when I travel, I love that feeling of, like, the unpredictability of it.
Yeah. Do you think it's the unpredictability, or is it more a sense of curiosity for what's coming up? How much of your trips do you even plan?
Yeah, so I've learned, I think it's a mixture of both curiosity and unpredictability. I mean, I've learned that the more unplanned I go, the more adventurous it is, and the better stories, et cetera, and experiences. At the same time, there are moments when it's like you're trying to find a place to sleep at night and it's dark and you're riding around and you're like, this sucks. I probably should have planned a place to sleep. But then sometimes it leads you to this crazy spot. And you're like, man, I slept inside a football equipment shed behind a high school. Like, what? That was so weird but memorable.
I'm sure we could go through glamorous spots. What's your most unglamorous wild camping spot that you could think of? You'd have a heap of them, I know. What's the first one that comes to mind?
Yeah, I slept on a bathroom floor in a truck stop in Idaho. And it was like 5 days in a row of just like howling winds at night, and I couldn't sleep well, and it was cold. And at that point, I felt like my mental state was really declining because of the lack of sleep. So I found a truck stop, and I pinned my bike against the door. So like if anybody came in, like my bike would tip over, and at least I'd like have a couple of seconds to prepare. And I just set up my tent in the bathroom, which the bathroom did not smell good, but I just needed to sleep. And I got like maybe 9 hours of sleep. No one came in, so it worked out well.
Actually, I'm thinking of other weird places I've heard of people sleeping underneath, like I would call it like a culvert in the road. It's sort of like a drainage system that goes under the road that if you're a motorist, you don't even know it exists. But if you're a bike rider, it means that you're out of the elements and protected from there. Have you ever been somewhere a bit like that?
I actually, when I was riding through Utah, it was like 100 degrees, and I was in one of those canyons, and I needed to cool off. And so I went into one of those like drainage pipes to like stay in the, just try to stay cool. And there was a hornet's nest in it, though.
Oh my goodness.
But that was the closest thing to that, definitely. And that, again, with bike touring, I love it, because it's like, you need to be resourceful. Sometimes like you just really need to cool off, so you'll do what you can. Like I definitely swam in some ponds and some rivers that were questionable as far as not the cleanest. But again, like when you're trying to cool off.
Definitely. I had that actual very same anecdote shared to me with previous guests of the show, Chloe and Mary. They were cycling their way across the French Pyrenees. It was their last day before getting to the Mediterranean Sea, and it was searing hot heat, and they were frazzled, and they were like, we just need to cool down. But yeah, they recalled a story of just not even looking at the water that they could spot, just getting straight in and then realizing after the fact, thinking, I don't know that we should be bathing in this. It's a bit manky.
Yeah. Yep.
I'm sure there's lots of bicycle travelers that can relate to this.
For sure.
Yeah, it's one of those things. I feel like when you travel in this way, there's things that you start not taking for granted. And the ability to turn a tap on that has running water, it would have to be high up on those lists, right?
Absolutely. And that's funny you say that, because honestly, like my first bike tour, that was one of the biggest takeaways, was just because even just like when you're camping, if you're camping in a beautiful spot, you got to set up your tent, your sleeping bag, you got to do this. It takes a while. But just when you get back from a bike tour, just a simple pleasure and gratitude of being able to walk into your bedroom, turn off the light, and just crawl into bed. Just like that. It's so amazing.
You're right. And to be able to, I guess there's the element of extra security that comes with that too, perhaps. I'm not saying that you're traveling with a sense of, well, no, I am. Like, as a bicycle traveler, you are traveling with a sense of an extra layer of vulnerability there.
Absolutely.
Because you are on display.
Exactly. Yep, you are on display. Yeah. Yep.
You've also done some bike touring in Europe as well.
Oh, yeah. When I was in 2016, it's kind of an interesting story. My father passed away. My mother had passed away before that. So at that point, both my parents were gone, and started to question just life in general. Like, what am I doing with my life? Like, who knows how long I'm going to be around for? And I felt like the only thing that made sense was to go on a bike tour across Europe. Like, because I felt like that was going to give me some perspective. Because, when you're living your everyday life, sometimes it's tough to see others' perspectives because you're just in that cycle, the same routine. So I felt like going to Europe would give me that opportunity. And so I flew into Rome. My only plan was, I knew I was going to start in Rome. I knew I was going to work on a farm in Switzerland for about 6 weeks. And then I knew that I was going to end in Amsterdam. But everything in between, I didn't know where I was going.
Oh, pure freedom.
Absolutely. Yeah, the film's actually, I made a film about it. It's called Two Wheels to Freedom. It's on YouTube. So you nailed it right there, freedom.
There's that word again, right?
Exactly. Yeah. And I mean, it was such a beautiful experience. I mean, riding through Italy and connecting with the Italians.
Because that's your background, isn't it? You have an Italian background.
Yeah. So I speak Italian. My grandpa was from Sicily, and I've always been fascinated with just like that culture. And for whatever reason, I just bond with like their personality and their sense of humor. So I love riding through Italy. And yeah, it was just such a great experience. It was my first solo bike tour, and just being on the road again. And yeah, riding through, Italy, and then, crossing the Swiss Alps, which is like, I'd never been anywhere like that as far as that scenery and just those like massive mountain passes and like the extreme weather, and just all of that was so beautiful. And I also rode through like Austria, and that was just, again, at that point, I was just winging. Like, I started following the river. I was like, this is a really beautiful river, so let's just see where it takes me. I did that for a while, and then, rode through Germany, and eventually ended in Amsterdam. Just such a great ride, and it gave me that clarity. It gave me a chance to kind of reflect and process like my father's passing, and just, it was such a blessing to me.
Hi everyone, it's Bella here from the show. Just a shout out to all my new listeners out there. Thanks for tuning in. You may not be aware that the show has recently just turned 1. If you're enjoying this episode, the chances are you're probably going to enjoy a few that are in our back catalogue as well, so make sure to take the time to check them out. Seek Travel Ride is a passion project of mine, and I do all the work on the show myself, from researching my guests, conducting the interviews, to putting the audio edits together and releasing the episodes. If you've been enjoying the journey so far, there's a few ways that you can actually help support the show. The first is to hit the link to buy me a coffee in the show notes. That helps the show out financially. But there's some other ways as well, and it's as simple as sharing the show with your family and friends, sharing it on your social media. That really helps get the show out there to a wider audience. The other thing is to make sure that you are following the show in your podcast player app, because that notifies you when all these new episodes drop as well. Once again, I thank you so much for your support to date. Now let's get back to that episode. There would have been moments in that trip where you would be physically on your limit crossing like the Swiss Alps, going up through mountain passes. And I still, going up and over the Stelvio Pass, for example, in Italy and places like that. And I imagine harder ones than that you would have had, possibly not higher, but still, you're on your physical limit. I find they're the times where you get a lot more clarity with things. it's not that you can actually think about them in that moment, but I think sometimes it's the act of sort of physically suffering through something perhaps gives yourself, one, a layer of satisfaction in what you can actually keep actually doing, but two, maybe what really matters.
Yeah. No, I totally agree with you. I mean, the first part, yeah, as far as it's amazing, again, and this isn't just with bike touring, but with travel in general, like you realize like you are so capable. You're so much more capable than you may have thought. I definitely think that. And there is something, again, like just pushing your body to that extent, it does give you some kind of clarity. It's almost like you're purging out something because you're exerting yourself so much, you know?
So did you wild camp quite a lot in Europe there on that trip?
Yeah. Yeah. I was doing a lot there, and it was nice. I mean, it just, I will say, like, it doesn't, in the US, it's just more dangerous in general. So not to say you can't wild camp in the US. I did it for like 7 months, but again, there was some sketchy situations that happened. But in Europe, I just didn't feel that like danger as much.
Yeah, okay. Because I was going to ask you, how did bike traveling through Europe compare to traveling across the States?
Yeah, that's the first thing that stands out as far as just the camping and stuff. And but for whatever reason, I hardly met any other bike tours or people on a bike tour like in Europe, like hardly at all.
Wow. I wonder if it's because they're more dispersed, like there's more than just one or two or three main sort of routes to take across there.
I think so. Maybe they're sticking to like the Eurovelo routes, and I don't take those routes. Usually, honestly, I like to just ride into town and be like, talk to people and be like, hey, what's a good ride or route that I can take for the next 50 miles? Just that alone, it's like, it gives you this opportunity to connect with the local, and they may know some roads that you couldn't have found like on your phone or something.
I'll tell you something really interesting, actually. I'm just thinking of, well, I've actually got two guests of the show that come to mind. The first one's Robert Fletcher. Amazing 81-year-old Robert just rode his way from the North Pole in Alaska all the way down to Ushuaia, Argentina to celebrate his 80th birthday.
How old is he?
He's 81 now.
Oh my God.
He left when he was 79 and as a way to celebrate his 80th rather than just doing the normal thing of having a party and cutting the cake, as he says. But he started cycle touring in the 70s. And something that came up when I was chatting to him was the fact that that was pre-internet age. It was pre-smartphone age. It was almost pre-guidebook age. It was like, learning about the world through an encyclopedia. And he mentioned something that you just said there, where you'd chat to people on the road.
Exactly.
To find out, where do I stay? What's this town called? Where to go? And then the other thing that reminds me of is Peter Gostelow, and he's been like a bicycle nomadic, semi-nomadic life now since 2005. Amazing. And he has said it's the one thing that he reflects back on now that has changed so much.
Yep.
He doesn't have as many interactions with people.
Yes.
Because he's not as reliant on needing their assistance for things.
Yes.
Yeah, wow. That's something that you can reflect on as well. I love the idea that you weren't just sticking to the Eurovelos, though.
Yeah. Again, if you're bike driving in general and you want to do the Eurovelo, cool, But for me, again, like you just nailed it, because a huge part of travel for me in like a lot of my best experiences is when I connect with someone it's unexpected. When I'm on those tours, I'm really trying to be in it. And so like just sticking to a phone, like it's like doing it for you in some ways. And I think it's just so much more like meaningful, and you feel a bigger self accomplishment when you're kind of relying on yourself. And again, like reaching out to people and just doing it that way.
Can I ask, you mentioned that you didn't start camping, you didn't camp when you were young at all. Did you grow up in a city?
Not like a big city. No, I grew up in a small town, like 20,000 people. I grew up I spent my childhood in the forest, though. That's how I spent my childhood, just running around in the forest.
Oh, awesome.
So that was sweet. Yeah, definitely. But the idea of camping always seemed just boring to me. And honestly, I don't camp. The only time I do camp is on a bike tour. Like even now, like the idea of like, let's go to a place and sit here for 3 days. To me, that it just doesn't, I like to be moving.
I hear you. I'm not someone that can go to the beach and sit on a lounge chair and just sun themselves. That bores me to tears within about 3 minutes and 27 seconds. Because what I was going to say there is something you mentioned. You worked on a farm in Switzerland, and I was thinking, is this a city slicker that's gone to a farm, and what would that experience have been like? What was it like working on a farm for 6 weeks? What was your perception going into it?
Yeah, such a beautiful experience. I traveled to this small village in Switzerland back in 2010, and then a couple of years later, I remember thinking, like, how amazing would it be to just live there, right? There was only 100 people that lives in this village. And so I just went on Facebook and I just typed in the name of the village just to see if anybody popped up. And there was one person who popped up. It was this family's daughter. I said, hey, I know we don't know each other, but does your family happen to need help this summer? And she just responded, yeah, like we need help making hay. And so I was like, cool. And then I just booked a plane ticket and then flew out there not knowing really anything about them. And it was really interesting. Like the day I met them, within like half an hour, it just felt like, oh my God, this is who I want to be around with. Like they were true mountain people, 70 years old, never left Switzerland. They hardly ever leave the mountain. I mean, and they're so kind. And what I love about them is they haven't been, I kind of want to use the word corrupted, honestly. But I think a lot of us have been like infiltrated our brains with this idea that we need so much technology and materialism and consumerism. And they had such a simple life of just taking care of their cows and their goats and having a garden and being a positive influence, in their community, taking care of each other. And it seems, I mean, for example, like I remember there was a thunderstorm, so we didn't work one day, right? And the family I stayed with, his name was Fritz, the father. I just sat outside with Fritz on the balcony for 2 hours and we just watched the thunderstorm. And I love how like that brings a lot of joy to him. And it's something so simple, but it was beautiful because I had that first temptation. I wanted to be on my phone. It's like, it was raining out, but then I saw him and it's just such a great experience to be around people like that because it's a different generation.
Not knowing exactly where in Switzerland it is, but knowing what Switzerland's like, I just imagine you're somewhere with this amazing vista and just cloud magic, thunder, lightning, all that sort of atmospheric stuff just going on there.
Yeah.
You're right, just spending time with someone of that age and sometimes just observing and listening to them.
Yes. The
stuff that they can teach us.
Absolutely. And again, he didn't speak English. I speak a little bit of German, but it's like you nailed it. Like you can learn so much from this person. And I want to be around him because, again, he finds so much joy in these simple things, right? The lack of stress and anxiety that he feels, which again, sometimes he has busy days where like they work hard. But again, because he doesn't surround himself with all this extra stress, it's really admirable. And I think it speaks to why their village, like why they all live so long there too, because they have a sense of community. They eat fresh food. Yeah. And a sense of purpose and lack of stress. It's really beautiful.
When you said they were making hay, I think I saw a photo of you on Facebook where it's like, it's a scythe or something that you're cutting with there. Like you're hand cutting it, right?
Exactly. Because parts of it's literally on the side of a mountain. Like literally, so there's parts where you can't use a machine, so you're using a scythe, right? And it's unbelievable. The family, again, like the wife, she's 71 years old, and these are mountainsides, and she's hiking up and down them and working out there for 10 hours a day in the summer with us. She's incredible.
Do you know what else would have been incredible? Just the cheese. I'm just thinking of the cheese.
Oh, yeah.
Like, wow, man.
Absolutely.
And the milk and everything. And working physically that hard, you have just so much more of an appreciation for it too. And I imagine the way that they look after their animals there is really admirable too. They're so important to their livelihood. They would take so much more care for them too.
Absolutely. Yeah. And yeah, the love they have for their animals. And I mean, sometimes if the weather's not great, so there's not as much work to do. So for the day, instead of sitting inside again and watching TV, we would just take a walk in the rain down to a different plot of land and we would just watch the cows or pet the cows. And, it would be an hour walk down there, but it was just worth it. And again, I love the fact that that's how he wants to spend his free time, spending it with his cows and just outside, even if it's raining.
So where do you live in the States now?
I'm in Monterey, California. So it's like in the center part of California, but along the coast.
Pretty far removed from a little Swiss village.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever thought about selling everything and taking off to travel the world? Well, my wife and I are planning to do just that. Even better, we should be able to earn money and increase the size of our nest egg while we do it. Will our crazy scheme work? Hi, I'm Jim Santos, travel writer and host of the podcast Travels with Jim and Rita. Tune in and you can follow along as we try to make this dream a reality. That's Travels with Jim and Rita on Buzzsprout and all major podcast outlets. You'll find the link in the show notes. Happy travels!
Do you find there's a lot more moments week to week where you reflect back on that time in Switzerland and you think of that village?
It's so funny because like I feel like you keep hinting at all these things that pop up in my movie. Like my movie Two Wheels to Freedom, like I end it by saying, every once in a while I find myself daydreaming about that special summer. And that's the truth though. Like you nailed it. Like I do very often find myself just thinking about those moments and how incredibly fortunate and how special it is to be spending time with people like that in such a beautiful place. And the cool thing is that it's that lesson, like the Facebook story about just like reaching out to someone. Sometimes in life, I think you just go for it, give it a shot, and you never know what will happen. Yeah.
Actually, there was a previous guest. I keep mentioning previous guests. Well, don't worry, everyone. We're going to be focusing on Daniel pretty hard in this episode. But it was a previous guest. It's just sparked it in me. Pippa Langen, she cycled around the world, and she said the biggest lesson that she sort of took away from doing that was allowing yourself to need assistance from other people and to be vulnerable in the way to ask for help.
Exactly.
Like we're sort of raised to be proud and not to ask for help, whereas over and above things that she's learnt from being cycling around the world is there is a bigger sense of community. People do want to help each other out and people will help you out. And sometimes it's okay to just say, I need a hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes the people that end up helping you, they gain more out of helping you, like it means so much more to them even.
I remember reading it years ago. There was a psychological study done which proved definitively that people get more joy from the act of giving gifts than receiving them.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I can 100% resonate with that.
Yeah.
So filmmaking, Daniel, it's something that you've obviously got a penchant for. How long have you been had that view of, telling a story through the lens of a camera and bringing things together?
Yeah, I mean, on my first bike tour, the one I was, had no idea what I was doing. I had a little GoPro with me and I was kind of filming just random stuff. And then when I got back, my buddy and I, we put together this, this little video and I remember thinking like, oh shoot, like if I do this again, I think I could capture something, And so when I rode across Europe, I planned, let's just film stuff and see what kind of story comes out of it. And the beautiful thing about with bike touring is you don't need to plan really anything. As soon as you leave and you start pedaling, the story is created because so many things are unpredictable and they happen. And that's what I love about making a film about bike touring, because you don't need to plan. Go with the flow and just film and see what happens, etc. Because so many things that you don't expect will happen. You know what I mean?
Totally. Like sometimes the plan goes out the window and that's where the adventure happens.
Exactly. And those are some of the most memorable moments, are the things that when you don't plan for. Because if anything, sometimes when you do plan and if it doesn't happen, you get disappointed. Or you have expectations, etc., and then you get disappointed. So it's nice to have no expectations and just ride, including the days that rain. When it rains, it sucks. We all know. But again, for me, like some of the most memorable days that I never had on the bike have been like riding through storms, and the stories that are created from that. And also just like the hardships, when you're going through those hardships, that's what you remember on a bike tour. I don't remember a lot of days where it was perfectly sunny and no wind and the camp spot was easy, but it's like, I remember riding over the mountain passes in Switzerland with freezing rain.
I bet you could recall the ache in your fingers descending them too, with the wind chill on them. And
for sure.
Yeah, I've done that a few times, ended at the base of a descent and just physically shivering and just thinking, is this where hypothermia sets in?
Seriously. I know what you mean about the fingers too, especially when you're gripping that cold handlebars and Yeah,
you had some pretty darn cold weather to deal with in the US as well on your trip. Extreme cold.
Yeah, because I wasn't planning on being on the road for 7 months, so I didn't have winter gear with me. And so by October in Montana, there was an Arctic cold front that came in, and it dropped all the way down to 13 degrees Fahrenheit for 3 nights in a row. And so I was wearing every piece of clothing that I had when I went to sleep. And I was actually scared going to sleep because I was afraid I was going to get hypothermia.
I'm just thinking, it's one thing that I've learned. There's no quick calculation you can do that transfers Fahrenheit to Celsius. But I'm thinking, is that like minus 20 something Celsius?
I think so, yeah.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, it was cold. Like it was, dangerous for sure. But the interesting thing is so I had 6 more weeks until I returned home to California. And after sleeping in those 13 degrees for 3 nights, it sucked something out of me that I couldn't get back physically. I was so much weaker like after that, and my stamina was way lower and my body was hurting way worse. I just think that like that was a shock to my system, and like I paid for it.
It's almost like your body had to use every bit of reserve to just get you through it.
Exactly.
It's like it had been to war for you in a way.
Yeah, there's certain things where I want to apologize to my body. That was one of them for sure.
And when you say apologize to your body, I mean, you're a physical therapist there, a physio. You know a fair bit about the body too.
Yeah, it's been really special working in physical therapy because I've built a skill set to where when I go on bike tours now, I know how to maintain my body. So it's been like a huge investment. Like this last bike tour was the best my body's ever felt. And it's because I've learned certain exercises to continue doing while I'm on the road, learn, the stretches, et cetera, learn recovery. And then also, maybe more than anything, I've learned to listen to my body because I think that throughout most of my life, like I had this competitiveness in me. And it was just like push, 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 and ignore pain. But now it's like, if you're feeling pain, like listen to your body and do something about it because it's not worth getting injured over.
It's one of those things because when your body's in like acute phase, it's very different. You've got the biggest ability to turn things around there.
Mm-hmm.
It's if you ignore it and then that little niggle becomes chronic. Oh,
exactly.
Yeah. You don't want to set yourself up for a life of being the person with the bad back or those sort of things either.
Yeah.
All right, let's get into this then. Let's get into your film here. Now, can I get this right? Did you initially set off with the idea of traveling from west to east? Were your original plans to finish in New York?
Yeah, that was my plan, to leave Monterey, California, no food, no money, and a sign that said, biking across country, ran out of food, anything helps. And that was the goal, to get to New York City.
What gave you the idea for that, first and foremost? Like, what gave you the idea of that curiosity of, I'm going to leave without food, I'm going to leave without money, and set off?
My grandpa, who was from Sicily, he came to the United States, and in the mid-30s, he was hopping train cars with the goal to get into California. And he had these stories, and he would say that sometimes he'd get dropped off at a random town, and so he would just knock on a door and say, hey, like, is there any yard work I can do for a meal? Right? And he had like this adventure, but his was for the sake of like trying to get to California. It wasn't for the sake of like, this will be fun to do, But I used to hear those stories, and I thought how interesting it was. And that was kind of instilled in me at a young age. And then somebody gave me a book called The Kindness of Strangers. That was about a guy who hitchhiked across America in the mid-90s with no food, no money. And he wrote a book about it. And I read that book, and that's when the idea got sparked. And I thought, I would love to do something like this, but I'd like to do it riding my bike. And so that's what inspired the idea.
Did you ever allow yourself a safety net? If you didn't find food that day, if no one helped you out in a way for a period of many days in a row, was there ever the safety net of just, well, I tried that and it didn't work? Or was it always, I'm going to keep at it no matter what?
Yeah, well, I actually felt fairly confident reading because I read a book by an environmental activist named Rob Greenfield, and he rode his bike across America, and he was dumpster diving a majority of the time. And so I knew that dumpster diving was going to be an option as far as getting food. And then I also knew that my sign was unique, and I knew that I stood out. Like by saying biking across country, ran out of food, anything helps. There was a certain percentage of people who were just curious for the fact of like, oh, this guy's going across the country. So the unfortunate truth is if my sign just said hungry, I wouldn't have received as much help. But the fact that I had a unique sign and my bike and everything, I was standing out, and it was like unique circumstances for people to see me. And so it attracted curiosity. With those two things, the dumpster diving and the sign, I felt pretty confident.
I think the fact that you're white Caucasian probably went in your favor as well.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm really happy that you brought that up because the very beginning of the film, the first thing you see is acknowledgement of my skin color. And the reason I did that is, there was a lot of people that I met on the road where I just saw the privilege that I had. Like, for example, when I was in Virginia, I met this Black man who was going from New York to California on this bike. We're sharing stories, and he's like, where you been camping most nights? And I was like, honestly, I've been sleeping in like baseball fields. He's like, cops don't bother you? And I said, yeah, sometimes they come, but like usually they just tell me to leave in the morning. And then he goes, man, I was camping in a campground where I was supposed to be sleeping, and someone called the police on me. Right? He had like long dreads, and like hearing stories like that is where I'm like, yeah, for sure. Like I had privileges that like other people didn't have, for sure.
Yeah. I always wonder what lottery do we win where it determines where we're born, which country we live in, what level of affluency our family's at and stuff, because it does really set you up for how your life's going to be a lot of the time. It takes a lot to break away and make a different mold from one way or the other. And so often we're not necessarily aware of our privileges because we've never had to be.
Absolutely.
And so what we expect as normal for everyone is anything but the fact. I certainly got the perspective that that's what happened here for you as well. It is a unique sign, though. Biking across the country, run out of food, anything helps.
Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been quite a talking point. As you say, the bike on its own is a talking point, but that sign, those conversations. Now, something that you did here, and the film talks about it as well, is like you were obviously filming the whole journey and you have amazing drone footage and you have talk-to-camera footage as well, but you were also wearing like hidden glasses to be able to film the people that you interacted with as well.
Yeah. And so the whole point was, I mean, I didn't want people to know I was making a documentary because then their reactions wouldn't be real. And so if they saw me, holding a camera, so I found these camera glasses. And then if I was fortunate to receive help, I'd say, hey, do you have a story about when somebody helped you and you really needed it? And so people would share these stories with me, right? And then afterwards, I would tell them I was filming a documentary and then they would sign a waiver, etc. But in the moment, they didn't know. That was like super important to me to capture these real raw interactions with people.
Yeah, I figure that you must have done something like that to be able to have them in the film itself. But those interactions, wow, they run so deep. And there's some they're all heartwarming, but some of them I felt were really heart-wrenching as well.
Yeah.
Like just as a viewer,
Yeah.
the people that give you the most seem to be the ones that there were two themes. They either didn't have much themselves. You even had homeless people giving you their stuff, or they had their own lived experience of not having anything and needing help. That seemed to be a common theme there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's, in my opinion, because they faced hardships in their own life, they knew what it was like going through a hard time. And so they were able to, or they were more willing to help. Yeah. And I think that as time went on and I was struggling more based on the lifestyle that I was living, I mean, I was, stealth camping and trying to find a safe place to sleep, etc., and trying to find a place to bathe, which was huge, and then as my appearance started to change, I was starting to get treated differently as far as my beard was growing longer, so I was getting harassed more, I was getting less help, but it seemed like at that point when I was receiving less help from more like, it seemed like the people who struggled the most in their lives, that was when they were reaching out the most, and they could feel the energy that I was putting out. It was really fascinating.
Personally, the thing that I've struggled with quite a lot is understanding what I should be doing when I encounter someone that's homeless, that's in need of that assistance and help. Been told, don't give money because that's, it's going to feed like an addiction or something like that. And you can see a lot of people's awkwardness at not knowing where to look. I think the one thing I've done a lot more of is actually acknowledge that they're there, say hello, smile. But I still put my hand up to say, I don't know. Since your interactions and having homeless people help you, but living in a way which essentially was pretty much homeless, but on a bike in a way, self-chosen, I accept that.
So, yeah, of course.
What would you advise people do?
Yeah. So the first thing is, what I learned is if you feel like you want to help, but you don't want to give money, ask, hey, do you need something from the store? What do you need? Right? Because sometimes they don't need any food at the moment. Maybe they need some sunscreen or tampons or deodorant or just, something, right? I think some people will feel better about that. And the other thing too is, and this is just from my personal experience, but as time went on, I was getting less acknowledgement from people. I was starting to feel invisible out there, right? Sometimes even if someone didn't have anything to give, but they just, waved and said, have a nice day, like that mattered because I felt seen that way. So I think, and that's something that we can all do, right? We don't have to give money or food, but just kind of, have a nice day. That's my opinion on those.
So acknowledgement at the very least.
Yeah.
Don't try and avert your eyes, look the other way.
Yeah, just acknowledgement.
The simple act of acknowledgement is something in itself.
Absolutely. And I also acknowledge that sometimes, obviously, assess the situation because there could be dangerous situations too, to where you don't want to be acknowledging someone where if you feel like you're in danger or something. And I'd like to also say, I still feel uncomfortable when walking past somebody who has a sign. You have to go into those 7 months. Like, it's just something that I think most of us feel. And I don't want to deny the fact that it can be uncomfortable.
I must say, though, coming back to your sign and those interactions you had, I especially loved that element of your film, Daniel, of asking people, what's the nicest thing someone's done for you? We've got so many examples of this film of nice things that people have done for you. I want to flip it a little bit for you. What's the nicest thing you felt you've done for someone else?
Great question. Great question. What's the nicest thing I think I've done for somebody else? Yeah, been there when they're grieving. Yeah, definitely. And just showing up and not talking, but just being there and letting them know that you're there with them, right? And giving them the opportunity to share things. And again, not even chiming in, because I think sometimes we truly just need someone to listen. It's amazing. You ever have one of those conversations when you're struggling in life, and if you're fortunate to have friends, to be able to share something and they don't even say a word, and then afterwards you feel, yeah, I feel so much better. And it's like, you didn't even say anything, right? And so I think just being there, someone, letting them know, showing up is the word, the phrase I would use, showing up.
Oh, I love that. Actually, there was a moment in the film where you really captured that. There was a lady, just trying to think, were they in Kansas?
Kansas City, Missouri.
She'd lost her husband.
Yeah, Fabiola.
Yeah. She invited you to her home because she'd seen you on the bike. She was wondering, and was it her husband had wanted to do something like that, or?
Yeah, it was a really interesting experience. So I met her in Kansas City, and her husband's dream was to bike across the country. And her husband died, I want to say maybe in his 30s. He had cancer, and he died before he could do that. And she told me that when she saw me, she thought about her husband, and she wanted to celebrate his spirit. So she gave me a place to stay and cooked me a meal, etc. And it was really beautiful. And it was the cool thing about that experience was, she was from Nicaragua, and she had a totally different experience growing up, right? Different culture, different language, everything. The beautiful thing is we bonded over the idea of grief. She shared stories about her husband dying of cancer, and I shared stories about my dad dying of cancer. And it was just a real good teaching moment to show that even though we had those different experiences as far as growing up, etc., we still shared the same human experience in regards to grief.
Yeah, and you are right. Being there for someone when they're feeling their most weakest that way, whether it's grief, whether it's depression, whether it's loneliness, despair of some sort, just being with them, knowing that then they know that you're there helping to share their burden in some way.
Absolutely. And they'll never forget it, because I'll never forget when people were there for me, right? And the really special thing is that's one thing we all can do. We can all show up there for someone every day. There's a really special opportunity to be that person to change someone's life by showing up.
It was actually pretty incredible. And notwithstanding, Daniel, I imagine there were lots of interactions you had on this trip that didn't even make the film. I'm sure you had interactions with people who may have said, no, I don't want to be in it. But there were times where you could see you were reminding people of loved ones in their life. There was a lovely moment with an elderly lady or older lady.
Yeah.
And, oh, gosh, I think it got me really in the feels. She had lost her son, and she was going to go into the store and come back to help you out with some food. And then you asked her name, and she said, and then she asked you your name, and your name, Daniel, is the same name of her son. Oh, God, that got me in the feels. And you just saw her open up so immensely there.
Yeah, it was a really beautiful moment to be a part of. And it was fast, really interesting. I mean, literally the moment I said Daniel, within a second, she was already tearing up. And
Me
just,
too.
Yeah. No, I feel you. I know what you mean. Yeah. So, that's why I just felt going on this journey. I felt that was one thing I didn't expect, is to have these super vulnerable, intimate moment with these complete strangers. Right. And it was so special. Those were moments where I had to step back and be like, oh my gosh, I did not expect this to happen. And I felt so honored, the fact that these people were opening up to me, and sharing really personal things.
Do you think there's a deeper insight there as well? Do you think it's an insight into maybe, I don't know whether it's fair to say that there's a level of loneliness out there that we're not aware of?
Yeah.
You made it to New York. You made the decision to turn back, right? And to ride back home to California. And as your appearance got more shabby, your interactions with people became less and less. And there was a moment in the film where you made a point of that, and you said, it's been ages since I've had any human connection here, and you were really missing it. Do you think perhaps people reaching out to you and those moments of them opening up, it's an insight into their craving for human connection as well?
Really great point. Absolutely. Absolutely. And what was really beautiful about this, or just interesting, I saw my own how judgmental I was of people. Specifically, I would judge men. I would think, oh, this guy looks like a macho guy, so he's not going to help. And then sometimes someone that I judged like that would come over and they'd have like a super soft heart. It was a good wake up call because it was showing like, man, I had some issues I need to work on. And it was also like reassuring and beautiful to show like just our appearance. That doesn't sum us up as a person, just the way that we look, right?
But it was so clear in the film that is just so what happens, and we all must do that, which is sad.
Yeah.
Because as you said, the more shabby you looked, the more likely it was that it was homeless people that were helping you out.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's like more towards the end of the film, everybody. All my listeners, you so need to check this film out. But it's more towards the end, and we have got so much adventure that happens before the end that I do not want to skip over. You had some pretty challenging weather extremes to deal with too. You had a moment when you set off and you were in the desert. Daniel, to me, it looked like you were in the flattest, straightest road in the world forever.
Yeah, that's what it felt like.
Like you were riding on a treadmill. What on earth is that road and where is it?
Yeah, the loneliest road in America is what they call it. It's in Nevada. Yeah, it's like this 400-mile stretch, like 18 mountain passes, and there's only like 4 towns. And my last day, I went off the route, and I had 3 mountain passes to climb, 84 miles, and no services. I woke up that morning with a certain intensity that I don't think I've ever had as far as on a bike tour, just knowing like, okay, like what scared me the most is just no shade. It's like I can't get out of the sun. And 84 miles, I don't ride fast, so like 84 miles took me a long time. And then like this like hellish headwind came, and it was like, oh no, this is not ideal.
Yeah, and I think was that the day you started getting like a blood nose?
Yeah, I ran out of water. 35 miles away from the next town, and then I got so dehydrated, my nose just started gushing, and that's when I got concerned because like the no water thing, I was like, okay, like I'm not feeling well, but like I can do 35 miles. I know I can, but then I just started losing all these electrolytes through my blood, and that's when I was like, this isn't good. This is not good. And so I had a moment, probably a 5-minute moment where I felt myself starting to panic, and I pulled over to the side of the road, and I was trying to talk myself down, and again I was telling myself like, I don't feel good. Like I felt like I had the flu, but I kept telling myself, you're not going to die, but you're not going to feel good. But just keep riding.
There were people that did meet you on that road at different, maybe not on that day, but at other moments, and they were handing you out water and stuff as well.
Yeah, the road angels, definitely. There was a guy I met named Bob who pulled over and gave me 2 bottles of water. Yeah.
Thank you, Bob.
Thank you, Bob.
The desert's one thing. You also then had massive storms bearing down on you as well. They looked nasty. What was it like feeling that you were vulnerable there and the elements were bearing down your neck?
So that was in Kansas, where I had like, there was a tornado that like ended up touching down in the town behind me. I heard the tornado sirens going, and I thought, oh man, like I gotta go. But there was this like sense of huge adrenaline rush, and honestly, I loved it. Like when there's big storms coming during bike touring, like I love that because you just feel that adrenaline going, and like you feel at mercy of nature, and you really feel the power of nature, which I love. Kansas is known for having like massive thunderstorms and also tornadoes, and so it was like I was kind of welcoming that, honestly.
I mean, I heard of Kansas probably before I was 7, Wizard of Oz. Like it's folklore everywhere, right?
Of course.
Where's Toto?
Yeah.
Those atmospheric conditions, like, I can't imagine like hearing the sirens going. You'd smell the rain though, and it's a way that Mother Nature makes us feel like about this big. You feel so minuscule in the scheme of things, don't you?
Yeah, and what's funny is before a huge storm like that, you can sense the energy, everything gets really calm. And it feels like all the energy is going into the storm. And it kind of gives me chills even just thinking about that, because it's like, like something big is coming.
Yeah, something big is coming. Did that storm get you, or did you manage to stay ahead of it?
I stayed ahead of it. I mean, it ended up coming, but that night, the loudest thunder I've ever heard in my whole life, like shaking, it was shaking the ground. I've never been a part of something like that before.
What was that like? Like being in a tent with a thunder all around? What was that like?
Yeah, and I was under this there was this picnic area in some park, and so I felt relatively safe there. But it definitely woke me up, and I stayed up. Again, I kind of enjoyed it.
Yeah, you sort of take energy from that all around you, don't you?
Yeah, and again, like witnessing like how awesome nature can be,
Speaking about awesome nature there, notwithstanding the fact that you don't plan your routes to every detail, I mean, you are riding across a country. You can't help but know what might be up ahead if you go in a certain direction. Were there places that you were like, I definitely want to ride my bike around here and see there? What places of natural beauty was something that you wanted to experience on this trip?
Yeah, Utah. I mean, Utah was so sick. I mean, riding through sandstone canyons, and that was such an awesome experience. Like, there's no other terrain like that in the world. I mean, it's so awesome. So that was definitely one of them. And then, I mean, Montana, just the mountains are so extreme and rugged out there, and the weather can be so rugged. And I just love how wild Montana feels. So that's definitely something else. Like, those two places stand out to me.
Actually, was it Montana where you had that really extreme cold?
Yeah, that was Montana.
You stayed a few days with an amazing warm showers host, didn't you?
Unbelievable. I was, after 3 days of 13 degrees, the next night it was supposed to get down 5 degrees Fahrenheit, right? And I was on this sketchy road, so I wanted to hitchhike across, get off this road. And this guy picked me up, and he said, his name was Larry, and he said, it's supposed to get down to 5 degrees tonight. And he's like, where are you staying? I was like, well, I'm going to camp. And he said, no, you shouldn't camp. Like, that's dangerous. And so this guy, he was on an Adventure Cycling Association route, which is like, they make bike maps, like bike touring maps. So he lived like on that route. So in his lifetime, he'd hosted 500 travelers.
Larry, if you're listening to the show, I need to speak to you. You need to be a guest. I cannot imagine the stories that you would have to share.
Unbelievable. And he had these guest books of all the people that stayed, right? He was so amazing. And he gave me a place to stay for 3 nights. And his whole outlook is just, I loved having him in the movie because his whole outlook was the idea of everybody needs to do bicycle travel. And he's like, his whole message was, it exposes you to people who are different than you, and then you have a better understanding of them, and then you have a better connection with the world, and the world's their place.
When he was saying that in the film, I was thinking, Larry's spot on. He's true. Because if we all reflect on that, and those of you listening to the show who've taken bike trips, I'm sure you'll be able to understand exactly what Daniel and I are talking about here. You change as part of whatever tour you do. It doesn't matter if it's 3 days, 3 weeks, 3 months, 3 years. You're changed by the end of it just through what you've experienced. I guess it's through being vulnerable as well, in a way. You're putting yourself out there. You're at the mercy of nature sometimes. Sometimes things don't go your way. You need help from other people. In a way, Daniel, it ties into what we've been talking about. It's that lived experience of having known what something's like before makes people more likely to want to help out someone who needs that.
Exactly. Yeah.
I totally dig Larry's perception. I totally dig it.
Yeah.
Larry, get in touch.
Yeah. Yeah, special person. He was building these bicycle camps all across Montana for bike travelers to stay in. He's like a road angel.
I wonder how many of them exist in the world, hey?
Good question. Come across a couple of them for sure. They're out there.
I mean, not just in the state. I've been told of a few of them through Europe as well, Slovenia and in other places. I mean, probably every country's got somebody. Let's face it, Daniel, if you or I find a bike traveler on the road, I think the first thing we want to do is probably find out, hey, where are you from? Where are you going? How far do you ride?
Yep.
How can I help?
Absolutely. Yeah. That's the cool thing that bike touring taught me for sure, because now I get like, there's been plenty of times where I meet somebody and, it's kind of a funny story. Like the last person I hosted was this Norwegian guy. He was biking down the California coast and I met him. I said, where are you staying, guy? And he said he was going to be camping. I said, dude, you can stay with me. And so I gave him a place to stay. I cooked him dinner, did his laundry. And then I actually gave him that book, The Kindness of Strangers, that kind of inspired the film, and said, hey, man, yeah, the time feels right, maybe you can give it to somebody else, And really special thing is we can all be that person who opens up our house and they'll never forget. Because I know I never forget when someone opens up their house to me. And so it's nice to return the favor, and then you become part of their story and their experience.
Yeah.
Pass it on.
I'm just thinking, Daniel, back to the whole idea of heading across a country without any money, without any food. You have an idea, dumpster diving exists, and we'll go into that shortly about food wastage, definitely. But really, you left with a hypothesis that people would help you out. Were you still blown away by that happening all the time?
Yeah. There's still a sense of, I felt actually some shame about it. Some shame. There was guilt and shame about holding a sign out there and receiving help for sure. One thing I want to touch on is, a lot of people ask, which I'm really happy to talk about, is they say, well, didn't you feel guilty, accepting money from unhoused people living on the streets, And I said, yeah, the first time someone that was unhoused offered me money, I declined it. And then they told me, they said, by you not taking this money, you're denying me the opportunity to do good, right? And he said, because I gained something out of this. So from then on, it didn't matter what the situation was. If someone was trying to give me something, because like you touched on earlier, sometimes we receive more from giving to somebody. So definitely.
That didn't even occur to me, because I must admit, I was wondering that. I was wondering were there instances where people are offering you stuff and you're going, actually, you need this more. And you did film that. You did say there was right near the end where a homeless man comes and he says, drink this, eat this. And this must have been after you'd endured the cold spell and were feeling no energy in your body, was like dying on you. You were depleted. Because he said, look, I can tell you need something. And you got yourself a place to stay and said, hey, do you want to join me? And he said, no, everything's fine. I think he had like a brain tumor. He was homeless.
Yeah, that was Gary. That was in Oregon. I mean, that was the most impactful moment, I think, of the whole trip for me. Because at that point, I mentioned all the stresses of living that lifestyle. And so I was sitting on the side of the road, just trying to stretch because my body was in a lot of pain. And then also mentally just feeling so exhausted. And my sign was not out. I didn't need food, right? I didn't need money. People were walking past me. And then Gary walks past me. And I truly believe that he felt the energy that I was putting out. Right. And he felt it because he's been through a lot of hardships in his life. So he was able to recognize it. Right.
Yeah.
And he says, hey, man, you doing okay? I said, yeah, I'm just kind of trying to stretch my body. And he says, hold on right here, man. And he runs across the street. And then with his food stamps, he buys me a bag of groceries. Right. And again, I didn't need the groceries, but what I did need is to be seen. Right. And acknowledged. And then he gave me a hug, and then that's what I definitely needed that so bad. At that point, that was 6 months of just this experience, and it all hit me at once. And that's like when I broke down, to be able to like process what has been going on, and the fact that I shared this in the film, like if we're fortunate, we have friends or family that like will be there for us, right? But for that time on the road, I felt like there were times that I didn't feel like I had that, but then Gary showed up for me and was that person, was that family member for me or friend or loved one who showed up for me when I needed it. And yeah, I'm so grateful for Gary. Yeah, so grateful to have met him.
Yeah, he gave you that opportunity for human connection when you needed human connection more than anything else.
Absolutely. And again, like he changed my life. He changed my life in the way that, again, like now I see that, man, this is so special. Like we could all be like Gary and we could show up for someone when they need it. And it doesn't have to be about food or money either. But just if you recognize, if you can sense somebody's energies off and just maybe even just asking how they're doing, that could change somebody's life.
I like that. I like that a lot. Sometimes, Daniel, when we're talking about things that are quite this deep, I nearly feel a little bit superficial going on to the next question.
Yeah.
Something I did want to talk about, we mentioned it a few times here, was dumpster diving and food waste. So you mentioned you'd read a book about food wastage in America. I think, did I read correctly, 30% of all produce in America gets thrown out?
Yep.
And we're not talking about it thrown out because it's moldy and past its date. In your film, you show yourself when you're dumpster diving. You show what's in the bin there as well. And it's perfectly, beautifully edible food.
Yep.
So you had an insight that this would be the case before you left?
Yeah.
Did you scope out what dumpster diving would be like before you actually set off on your bike trip?
No, I had never done it before this bike trip. But even then, even though I read that book, I still had no idea that it would be this much food being thrown away. Where I literally mean like dumpsters full of food that's good.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, there'd be days where like I'd stuff my bags and it's like I'm stocked up for the whole day. Especially in the Midwest, like because on the coasts where there's more unhoused people, they lock the dumpsters, which is like, let's throw away this food and say you're not allowed to take this food that's perfectly good. And if you do try to take it, we're going to call the police on you for trying to get food that's thrown away. What are we doing here?
Oh, my gosh.
Yeah.
It's not often I'm speechless. I'm aghast at that.
Yeah, when you really think about it, like it just doesn't make any sense. And it's embarrassing. I'm ashamed of it.
So some areas lock their dumpsters. So the Midwest, you said, was quite prolific. Is that because there's more food produced there or just because they're not locked?
I think it was more like smaller towns and like I think like less unhoused people and just more rural areas and things like that. Bigger cities, there's just more unhoused people, et cetera. And so, yeah, and it was shocking. It was totally shocking to see how much food was being thrown away. But just became part of my daily routine, and just go and, load up on my snacks for the day. And was, I honestly preferred that over the panhandling, like holding the sign, because for 7 months doing it, I still never once felt comfortable holding a sign out there. There's just a lot of shame about it.
Yeah, I can understand that. But I mean, you ate pretty well.
Yeah.
Like I said, it's not like you're eating stuff that's marginal by any measure. What was some of the best stuff you took out of a dumpster?
I'm a huge bagel lover, so like bagels were always sweet. I mean, there were steaks. I didn't take the time to cook them, but like they were perfectly good steaks. I mean, during the summer, there was a lot of great fresh fruit, things like that. There's always pastries, but I had to stay away from that because I wouldn't feel good after eating that stuff.
You got to limit yourself.
Exactly.
I just remember punnets and punnets of like strawberries, perfectly good apples, like bags of apples. And
yeah,
to some degree, do you think there would have been days where you were just eating so many beautiful fresh produce and your body was full of vitamins that day?
Yeah. Yeah, honestly, yeah, for sure. Definitely wasn't lacking vitamin C while I was out there.
I wonder if things will change in that respect and whether there'll be... I know certainly in France there's legislation against it.
For sure.
I'm not cognizant of whether that's the case in other countries, but it would be great to see countries or even states just take that lead.
Yeah, they are making changes. It's happening. It happened. But we got to talk about it. You got to bring this stuff to attention in order for it to change.
Yeah, because something I noticed actually is you always blurred out any of the signage on these dumpsters. Why was that?
Yeah, so it was like information just like either on the supermarket, things like that. And I just didn't want to have any legal issues, so I figured I would just block it out. Because who knows, they may think it's like bad press and then want to like sue me or something.
Yeah, of course. Do you think you could go without saying it's probably every supermarket had this?
Yep.
Gosh.
Mm-hmm.
So dumpster diving got you through.
It was a huge part of it.
So did you develop a routine to know when to do this? Like it wasn't the middle of the day, was it?
Yeah, I would go in the mornings when they would throw out all the stuff that's like past the sell-by date, which is totally fine for, especially if we had bread. That stuff's so processed. That stuff will stay there for a month. But I would go in the mornings and just like wait until they threw out that shit. Like when the new shipment would come in, they threw away everything off the shelves and just grab my snacks for the day. And it was kind of a nice way to wake up, And it's like, cool, we got some good. Because then they kind of dictated like how much time I need to spend holding this sign.
I know this is a rough statistic, but what percentage of your trip do you think you held a sign? Do you think you relied on it for 70, 80, 90%, 50%? Like how much were you reliant on that?
Well, so I would do it like usually once every 3 days. I would spend like 7 or 8 hours out there on that day. I would do it like a couple hours in one spot, and I would jump back on my bike and I'd ride maybe 20 miles and do it again. And because I didn't want to do it every single day. And I would just stock up on as much like food and money as I could. And again, I'm so privileged to be able to do this. Like, just want to recognize that, like, because there's people out there who don't have a choice. They just have to do this. But I did find like kind of a rhythm with it and found out like what works best. Yeah. Because sometimes, again, there was like people who were just like, oh, you're on a cool adventure, man. Like, yeah, I'll hook you up with some food. I had these benefits and like privileges while doing it.
Yeah, it sort of really opens your mind or your eyes open to that too.
Mm-hmm.
I want to touch back on the point of vulnerability though, because there was a moment, and it was with wild camping. Oh my gosh, the fear was really palpable. I think you were at a situation, you were going through an area that you didn't want to be in and you didn't feel safe to camp and you couldn't find somewhere, and you landed on camping, I think, at the back of a big warehouse.
Yeah, yeah.
And there's a moment then, it's like pitch dark in the middle of the night, right? And then you hear a car and you're in your tent bricking it at this point. What's happening here? Like, I can't even imagine the fear and the thoughts racing in your mind, hearing this car with lights on your tent coming.
Yeah. So what led to that was I was actually taken in by this very kind woman from Colombia. I was in a town called Paterson, New Jersey, right? Which definitely had some rough neighborhoods. And she was concerned about me sleeping out there, right? And so she gave me a place to stay. And it was such a beautiful experience. She was sharing all these stories about growing up in extreme poverty in Colombia. And then her daughter's boyfriend comes home like midnight, and he didn't trust me, even though like this woman said, no, he's fine. Yeah, I want to host him, and she was gaining a lot out of being kind to me, But he like threw all my stuff out of the house, and like told me like to leave, or like there's this physical altercation. So I left, right? And so that point it was like 12:30, and I'm like wandering like gang neighborhoods in Paterson, New Jersey. And because normally I would never sleep behind a warehouse. Like that was a really sketchy area, but I didn't want to spend another second like riding through a gang neighborhood. So I just thought like okay, I can just hide out behind this warehouse. And I had a really bad feeling about sleeping out there. And then I fall asleep, and then like 3 a.m., I just hear this truck just driving towards my tent. And my first thought was like, just waking up from sleep thinking someone's going to run me over for whatever reason. That's just what they're doing. And then I heard the truck stop, and then I'm just sitting there like, what's going on? And then I hear the door slam. And so it's like, okay, they're getting out. So they're getting out to rob me. And then I hear the guy say, get out. And at that point, so I'm trying to like make my voice sound non-confrontational. I'm like, yeah, like 1 second. And like I unzip my tent, and all I see are just headlights, right? So I don't know if a person's like pointing a gun at me or not. And I'll leave the rest of the story because that's in the film, you know?
Oh, I got to say, yeah. I mean, you're here now, but far out, yeah. Like, it was like hard in my mouth. I was just sort of thinking, every time I've ever been scared with the thought of wild camping, of what could go wrong, that whole scenario is sort of what man, whoa.
Yeah. And you know, that was so traumatizing for me. Again, like I'm grateful now at this point because it gives me this different understanding about like what it can be like for people who are sleeping like on the streets, like how terrifying. Because the rest of the trip, I was traumatized. Like I was going way overboard trying to find like safe places to sleep, extreme paranoia because that just, and even when I be in like relatively safe places, I just felt traumatized from that.
Do you feel an extra sense of vulnerability with wild camping having had that experience?
So this past summer, I did a bike tour across Europe and I didn't feel it there, no. Yeah, but I definitely for sure, I take extra precautions for sure now. There's no question. If anything, maybe I was getting lazy and like too comfortable on the US tour. But again, like when I see like women who are unhoused, like I really, really feel like, man, I can't even imagine how terrifying and dangerous that is for them. There's just this new like sense of like understanding and I'd say compassion towards people who are living on the streets now, because that is not a joke. That is traumatizing. So like that is going to affect you and really bring you down in ways that I can't even imagine.
And that actually came across with some of the strangers that were helping you out. A lot of them said, I've lived on the streets before. I know what it's like. I don't want you to have to go through this. I'm helping you out. Or I'm helping you out because people have helped me out.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, your eyes opened up a lot more, Daniel, in terms of how much homelessness there was.
Yeah, for sure. Because it was people that I wouldn't have thought were like living on the streets. And that just showed me like, because there's like a stereotype we keep thinking of our mind, like long, shaggy beard and like torn up clothes, etc. But I think there's a lot of people who are unhoused that we have no idea.
Mm.
And it also showed my judgments. Like in the past, I think I thought this person's living on the streets because they're a drug addict or something, addicted to drugs, right? Which is not the case at all. I think it's just showed my ignorance in a lot of ways.
On the flip side, there's heartwarming moments as well. And I don't want it to come across that it was only homeless people or people in need that helped you. I am sure that there were people of all sorts of spectrum who did help you on this trip too, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And just feel so grateful to share those moments with those people because it just showed it was a unique situation being the person holding the sign because I was able to capture, it felt nice to see that there's a lot of people who are really trying to do good. And so that was really special.
Yeah, this trip isn't about being vulnerable and being sad about the state of the world. There was so much uplifting stuff that came from it, and I don't want to give people the wrong perception whatsoever. It's awesome. A new question I've started asking people because of a recent guest, Jack Greenwood, he suggested he's just come back from a huge bike trip all the way through South America, and he was talking with a friend who he did this trip with, and they said, people ask you about your trip and you're like, where do I run with that? And he agreed that the best question to ask people is, tell me about a day of your trip. And I thought, I love that. So I'm asking this of my guests now. So Daniel, I know we've touched on it broadly, but I want you to just take me into a day on your trip. And it can be any day, anything could have happened. It can just be a moment of it, but I just want you to transport me to an experience on one day of your trip.
Love the question. And I think I'm going to use that as well. Like when I talk.
Thanks, Jack.
For sure. Like when I meet like people on bike tours, I have so many questions. I'm going like so fast and it's nice to maybe slow down and just ask one like that. So that's a great question. Montana, Arctic cold front. Got word in the morning that they're closing this 11,000 foot mountain pass that I plan to ride over because there's an Arctic cold front coming through. And so I had to make the decision. Okay, do I want to still try to ride over this mountain pass? Or do I want to take a 150-mile detour around the mountain, right? And so I made there wasn't too much thought. It was like, dude, I want to try to run over this mountain pass, even though the snowstorm's coming. And I thought, when else in my life am I going to have the opportunity to ride up this mountain pass that's close to cars? So literally I could be the only person on this mountain up to 11,000 feet in the Rocky Mountains. And so I went for it. And I just remember being so incredibly present and just like psyched about and feeling alive. Like, man, I'm out here in the Rockies and I have this whole mountain to myself on a bike. Like, so sick. But as time went on, I just kept seeing that storm getting closer, like, I was like, I gotta go, and started snowing at the top, and the road was freezing over. And then I got to the top of this first peak, and I remember thinking, okay, like, I looked at the second peak and those clouds were dark. And I said, I have to go over there. And I sat there for maybe 5 minutes up at 11,000 feet and had to make a decision. Okay, like, and I remember telling myself eventually, like, if I get stuck up here, like, they won't find me till the spring. I mean, it's closed until springtime, right? And so I made the correct decision, which was a hard one because it took me 5 hours to get to the top of the mountain pass. But I made the correct one to go back down, and I ended up having to take the 150-mile detour. But that was a memorable day.
Yeah, it's a case that you certainly don't regret doing what you did, but I could just imagine what it's like to have to just turn around and retrace your steps, meaning that for a whole day you hadn't progressed.
Yeah, for sure.
FYI, it's not like you head down the mountain and then you're in a beautiful sunny climate. Like, it's still freaking cold, right?
Oh, yeah. And that was the beginning of the 3-day stretch of 13 degrees. That was the night that it happened. So I had to go back into that. But
is this a serendipitous moment in a way? Is this when you met Larry?
I didn't even think about that. You're right. Absolutely. Great point.
Taking these choices is reasons for it. The footage from that did make the film, that mountain pass. What's the name of the mountain pass?
That's the Beartooth Mountain Pass in Montana.
Beartooth Mountain Pass, Montana. That's got to be like your favorite mountain pass in the US now, right? Even if it wasn't before.
In the US, yeah. And it's unbelievable. Like, the idea that I got to ride that with no cars when the road was still paved. Because the snow, by the next day, obviously that road was done. But like having one day to have the whole mountain to myself was unbelievable. There's no way I could have ever dreamt that, and it happened.
There's some amazing experiences that you have had on this trip, Daniel. Talking about the human connections right throughout, obviously, it's the constant theme here, but there's a moment where you camp within, like, your wild camp is within a big tree in what I imagine is like an old redwood forest or something. Like, it was like a great sequoia maybe, or what sort of tree were you camped within there?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. I was riding through Humboldt County, Northern California, and it started raining one night or one late afternoon. I was trying to find this place to get out of the rain, and I came across this redwood forest, and there was this giant redwood tree that was hollowed out at the bottom of it. And so I set up my tent inside the tree, and there was two things. First of all, it was super warm, which I didn't expect, and it was so incredibly quiet in there. And there was some part of me that felt like I was being like nurtured and like held by this ancient being.
Yeah.
Because that tree was like 1,000 years old or something.
It's
like,
huge.
It's so unbelievable. Yeah.
I don't think this very Australian here has ever seen a tree like that. I've seen some amazing, eucalyptus trees in Australia, and I've seen some amazing specimens in Europe, but I don't think I've ever seen a tree like that.
Yeah. I've never seen. There's a certain feeling when you're in a redwood forest. It's hard to explain, but you feel the energy, and it's something different and special, not like any other place in nature I've ever been. There's something like wise about the forest, if that makes sense. It's like they've been around for so long, and you feel that.
Yeah, they have their own habitat. You know what I'm thinking of though, Daniel? It's something we talked about right at the very start. You were never a fan of camping in the outdoors, but you used to hang out in forests. And here is a case where you camped in the tree in the forest.
Good point. Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Absolutely.
Can I ask, when you're on tours like this and you discover places for the first time, are you the sort of person that ever wants to return back to the same place?
Yeah. I do like returning, for sure.
Are there places that you've discovered, whether in the States or in Europe, that you just can't wait to go back to, or you want to maybe spend more time in than you possibly had?
Yeah, mostly in Europe. I've returned to some of the places. Like this past summer, I rode over some of the same mountain passes in Switzerland that I did a couple of years ago, just for the pure joy of it. Yeah, definitely.
Okay, we've talked about this film so much. People are going to be curious about it. How can people who are interested in this film watch it for themselves? How can they find it?
So a couple ways. If you go to my website, we are all in this together movie.com. That'll bring you the direct links to 3 platforms: Apple TV, Amazon Prime, and Google Play. That's where it's playing right now. Yeah.
Awesome. I will provide links to that in the show notes as well. Much like Larry thinking the world would be a better place if more people traveled on a bike, I feel could also be a better place if people watched your film and got the insights from it as well.
Thank you.
I loved it. It had me on the highs and lows, on the emotional roller coaster spectrum there as well. You know, the highs of being able, that freedom of being an incredible scenery, to the low moments of being so vulnerable.
Yeah.
But then also the beauty of humankind there, just kindness of strangers all throughout. Yeah. So I will definitely link to it. You've also got some accolades to your credit now. Film Festival winner extraordinaire.
Thank you.
What's that been like?
Super special because I feel like the people who showed up for me in those moments and I was fortunate to capture, like, it's like celebrating their kind acts, you know? So in some ways, when the film receives an award, it's like we all received it. It's a collaboration with all these people I met, all these strangers. And so it's like they're being celebrated, which I love the idea of celebrating that.
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm.
A question for you. What's your biggest reflection now, having done this trip, of the US? Before leaving, you must have had a perception of it. What's been the thing you've learnt the most about your own country, having travelled in this manner?
Yeah, my uncle always says this phrase. He says, there's more that brings us together than what separates us. I definitely believe that after like having these conversations with these people. It's whether somebody's sharing a story about grief or sharing a story about drug addiction or, you know, sharing a story about heartbreak or sharing a great story about joy. Like you realize like, oh yeah, I've shared that. You know, we may have grown up in different neighborhoods and maybe different cultures and maybe even have different political beliefs, but we all share the same human experiences. And that's really what this taught me.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I'm just thinking of all the human connections you were able to make on this trip. There was a moment where you were hitchhiking with a group of guys. I think they were BMX riders.
Oh, yeah.
That sounded like an awesome experience in itself.
They were so great. And they're sick riders. They're so good. I had no idea. Definitely. Yeah, people like Zach Gerber, Devin Denham. You know, these guys were dope. And they put out awesome videos. And like they were just coming back from filming a video up in in New York City, and I just happened to catch a ride with them, and they were so fun. That felt like just bonding with like other cyclists and spending 6 hours laughing in the back of a van with them was just like so great, and I definitely needed that. I'm so grateful for those guys, you know.
Yeah, I think as soon as you get in the van, they're like, "Hey, do you want half-eaten burrito?" Like, do I what?
Totally, and I felt like I'd found my people. You know, it was great to be with them.
That's a moment where you happenstance and were able to jump in a van with some other bike riders. But you obviously saw other bicycle travellers on this trip. Did you ever spend any days riding with them at all, or did you stay solo mainly?
You know what's really funny is there was numerous times where I met people and they wanted to ride together, but I actually declined it. I felt like it was going to take me out of the experience. And I did feel sadness about that too, because in some ways I missed some opportunities of connecting with people, but I was really trying to stay focused and stay independent. And there was also this weird part of me that was trying to stay very anonymous this whole time, because I knew that this film was eventually going to come out. And I just didn't really want people to know at the time what I was doing. So, yeah.
Do you think if you had your time again, you would change that?
Yeah, for sure. Because the anonymous, like, what is that? Like, what pass up like an opportunity to bond with somebody for the sake of like trying to keep a secret? You're making a documentary. It's not worth it. You know, those travel experiences, that's like once in a lifetime bonding with people. And those are usually the stories you remember the most. And so I definitely would have taken people up on it next time.
Feel obviously bicycle travel is part of you now, like seeing the world, slow travel, finding, discovering places on a bike. I don't think that's going to stop for you somehow, is it?
No, it's definitely a huge part of like my identity. And it's just the greatest thing that I've been fortunate to be able to do. Yeah. And it just gives you a different perspective of the world. So it's super special. I would love it if everybody could do it. I think the world would be a better place if everybody could go on a bike tour.
So a random superficial question, because I got to throw some of these in there, right? Where's the country you want to go bike touring in next? One that you've not been to. If you could go anywhere and discover anything, what would it be?
I think Norway. Norway sounds awesome. Just like those massive fjords there, and just like there's a lot of curiosity. I don't know too much about Norway and their culture. Obviously, I've seen photos of how picturesque it is, but it's just like those mountain passes with the fjords, like that just seems so epic.
Yeah, you're reminding me of a film I watched, gosh, many years ago now, of I think it was surfers in Norway. They went to like this secluded beach and built themselves a hut out of all the stuff that drifted on the beach. I don't know if you've seen this before. And they also collected rubbish for a period of time while they were there as well. Yeah. And the reason it's reminded me of it, Daniel, is because something that I learnt from that was that in Norway there is a law that if a supermarket is trying to sell something that is expiring on that day or after, then you're allowed to have it for free.
Really?
Yeah, because Norway is a pretty expensive country. I'd say it's probably more expensive than Switzerland, which is hideously expensive.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, they did that. And actually, if my memory serves me correctly, when they left, because they had collected all this rubbish, I think it was like 2 or 3 helicopters that came in to collect it all, like to draw it all out because it was so remote.
Right.
I'm pretty sure it was Norway. I'm sorry, listeners. I cannot remember the name of this documentary. I'm going to try and see if I can Google and find the answer. And if I do, then I will include it in the show notes.
Please do. Sweet.
But yeah, no, Norway's a good shout. I haven't been there. I definitely want to go.
Yeah.
Alrighty, Daniel, I really need to wrap this up. If people want to follow you on your socials and stuff, where are you most active and how can they do that?
Yeah, Instagram, _travelin, no G, right? So it's travelin _dude. On YouTube, the same thing. I have my first film on YouTube. Again, it's the same name, the traveling dude. My first film, I'd love to share it with you on YouTube. It's just, if you type in 2 wheels to freedom, you'll see that's my first bike film. It's about riding 6 countries in Europe, and I'm super stoked about that bike film. And I'm also putting out a new bike film in April. Really excited. It's called The Child Within, and it's about finding the thing that makes you feel like a child again. And for me, it's riding my bike, and this film takes place in Europe, riding across Europe again. And so stoked to put this one out. Yeah.
Well, we all have to watch it because we all have to watch that footage of you on your first bike ride.
Sweet. Yeah, exactly. Yep, that's going to be it. It's going to be in it.
Exactly. Alrighty, Daniel, we've got to wrap things up. I've got 3 questions to finish the show with that I ask all my guests. The first one, just so that you get to now be part of the Seek Travel Ride playlist, each guest has chosen a song that goes on this playlist. It's available on Spotify now, everyone. And I want to know, if you were to pick a song that should be the soundtrack to your traveling trip, to your trip here, what would that song be?
Love this idea. I'm sure there's no one that's ever heard this song, but
unique songs are the best ones.
Yeah, I agree. It's called Take Rollin', and it's by a band, Take Rollin'. It's by a band called Foxtrot Sierra and His Uniforms. Super small band out of Germany, surf psychedelic rock. It's just like, I was listening to this album when I was like, just in the desert, right? And it's just like, every time I hear this song, it just throws me back to be like being in the desert. Kind of a cool story. I wrote them an email when I got back from my trip, and I said, hey, just want to let you know I was biking across the country and I was listening to your album the whole time, and the dude sent me for free. He sent me a record of that album and like signed it and wrote me a note, and like, it was so cool. He did that.
That's awesome. Oh, how could you not choose them?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Tape rolling, Foxtrot Sierra.
And His Uniforms. Kind of an interesting name, right? Yeah.
I will add you to the playlist. Seek Travel Ride. You are on there now, Daniel. Okay, final 2 questions, short and sharp. These ones should be easy for you. All right, hypothetical scenario. You're going to be riding your bike all day, and you have a choice. You can either ride it all day up a perpetual never-ending climb, or alternatively, you can ride all day into a perpetual grinding headwind. Which one are you going to do?
Taking the climb for sure. No question at all.
So what's your reasoning for the climb?
Oh, I mean, I actually get kind of a high off of the climb. I love that because you really get your blood flowing and your circulation, and you feel strong when you're climbing up a mountain pass, especially on a loaded bike. It's a wonderful feeling. It's empowering.
I'm with you there. Okay, final question, Daniel. Again, you're riding your bike. It's only for 4 hours. It's a short day for you, but 4 hours of bike riding are ahead of you. and you have a choice to ride that bike for 4 hours on your own or alternatively ride it with other people, what would you do there?
Yep, I always ride alone. I prefer riding alone. I'm grateful for riding with friends, but for me, when I ride alone, I do my best thinking, I do my best reflecting, I do my best processing life, because it's more about riding. It's more than just riding a bike. It's like really gets me to a mindset. I feel so inspired when I ride alone. I get a lot of creative ideas. It's nothing but really, really good vibes when I ride alone. So I definitely prefer that.
I 100% can resonate with that. You know, bike riding for me gets me in my happy place. I can solve problems or forget about them. It's meditation in pedaling circles sometimes.
Totally.
I totally resonate with that. It's not that I don't like riding with my buddies, but sometimes I just need that time on my own too. Well, Daniel Troia, it has been an absolute pleasure. The time has flown past for me. I feel energized from speaking with you, and we delved into some pretty deep topics too, but I just want to say thank you so, so much for sharing your stories and experiences with Seek Travel Ride.
Thank you. It's a huge pleasure to be on the podcast, and thank you for what you do. When we were talking before we started the podcast, I feel so inspired seeing you just go for it, and it's turning into something really special. So thank you.
That was such an incredible conversation to share with Daniel there, and to have so many insights come through from not just his trip from his film, but also just from what he's observed just with his adventures that have taken him to numerous places all around the world. I certainly can't recommend enough checking out his film, We Are All in This Together. If you're anything like me, be prepared for it to take you through all senses of human emotions as well. But I'm sure that you will be energized and probably have your perceptions about certain things in this world flipped a little bit on its head too as well. If you're enjoying the podcast, join us in the Facebook group Seek Travel Ride, be part of our community and get in on all the discussions. Many guests of the show are also part of the group, so it's a little extra way for you to interact with them and find out more about their stories. I've got links to the Facebook group page in the show notes as well. Until the next episode, my name's Bella Malloy. Thanks for listening.